and fudgy brownie with the cream cheese filling. So first, preheat your oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 160 degrees Celsius, and you will need a 9-inch square, 23 centimeter baking pan, and we need to line it with a piece of aluminum foil. Now, the best way I have found to do this is to take a piece of aluminum foil and then just take your pan and put it on the outside like that, and just form it, the foil, to the outside of the pan, like so. And then what you can do is just take that off and then just fit it in. That seems to help prevent the ripping of the foil. So when we make first we're going to make the brownie batter. We're not going to use an electric mixer for this. We're going to just do it all by hand. And that's what gives it that really dense and fudgy texture, because we're not going to beat it a lot. So the first thing we need to do, in a heat-proof bowl, put 4 ounces, that's 115 grams, of unsweetened chocolate, and chop that. Unsweetened chocolate is chocolate in its rawest form. There's no sugar added. It's very bitter. And it gives us a really nice, rich flavor, chocolate flavor to the brownie. And then we're also going to add a half a cup, 113 grams of butter. And you can use salted or unsalted, whatever you want. And just cut it into small cubes, because then it will melt faster. Because what we're going to do is put our bowl over a saucepan of simmering water, and we're just going to melt the two together. And just stir it every once in a while until they're all melted together. Okay, so everything's all melted, so remove from the heat. And let's give it a quick stir. Now what I do is I just check the temperature. You want it kind of warm. You don't want it like really hot. If you touch it and your chocolate is really hot, just let it sit for a few minutes, because you want it like lukewarm. So next we're going to add the sugar. 1 1/4 cups, 250 grams. And I'm just going to, you could use a wooden spoon, a spatula. I'm going to use my wire whisk. Now that may seem like a lot of sugar, but keep in mind that we used unsweetened chocolate, which is really bitter. So we're using a little more sugar than what you would use, say, if you were using semi-sweet chocolate. So just whisk that in really well. And then I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Try to use the pure, it's better flavor than the artificial. And then we need 2 large eggs, and we're going to add them one at a time. And just beat that in. And then the second one. As you can see, this is really fast and easy to do. Okay, and then now switch over, if you're using a whisk, either switch over to like a wooden spoon, or I like my spatula. And what we're going to add is a half a cup, 65 grams of all-purpose flour, plain flour, and just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I like to use a kosher. Now if you use salted butter, I would just leave that salt out. And then, as you notice, we didn't use any baking powder, baking soda, because we want a dense and fudgy brownie, so you don't use any artificial leavener. And what we're going to do is just beat this by hand, because it's quite dull right now. So what we're going to do is beat it until it gets nice and shiny and starts to move, come away from the sides of the bowl. So maybe a minute. Your arm does get a little bit of a workout here. So you can use a wooden spoon for this, or if you have a really strong rubber spatula like I have, you can use that. Okay, so we're That's looking good. It's getting nice and shiny and glossy. My arm is getting sore. It's another sign, you know. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is remove a half a cup, 120 milliliters of the batter. We're going to use that later for the top to swirl with the cream cheese. Give it, because if you notice, cream cheese brownies have that really nice marble top. So put that aside, and then just going to pour the rest straight into our pan. This is a really nice brownie just on its own, even before we have the cream cheese. Okay. And then with the back of a spoon, or I'm using an offset spatula, just spread it all out. Try to get it as even as possible. And make sure you get in the corners. Okay, that looks good. Okay, next we'll make the cream cheese filling. So now for the cream cheese filling. I'm going to use a food processor for this. You could use a hand mixer, or you could even do it by hand if you want. So the first thing you need is 8 ounces, 227 grams of cream cheese. I like to use a full fat here and have it at room temperature. And just put that in there. And then I'm just going to process just until it's nice and creamy and smooth and get all the lumps out. Just scrape down the sides if you need to. Okay, so then I'm going to add a third of a cup, 65 grams of granulated white sugar, 1 large egg, and just a half a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. And then I'm going to process this until it's nice and creamy and smooth. You don't want to over process it because we don't want it watery. You still want it thick, but just until everything's really nice and creamy and smooth. Okay. Just scrape down, make sure everything gets all mixed together. Okay, that looks good. Food processor makes really quick work of that. And then, so what we're going to do is just spread the cream cheese filling on top of the brownie mixture. You see, it's still quite thick, and that's the way you want it. You have to be careful when you use the food processor because there is a tendency to over process, and then it becomes too thin, which is not what we want here. And then I'm just going to take some take the back of a spoon, or I'm going to take my offset spatula and just spread that as evenly as possible over the brownie layer. This is really nice because you get like cheesecake and brownie all in one. Make sure you get all the sides and the corner. Okay, so now we have that done. So now you have that half a cup of reserve brownie batter. So what we're going to do is put little dollops all over the top. I like to put about 16, so I like 4 rows of 4. I guess that's maybe, I don't know, a little more than a teaspoon. It's not critical, because we will be swirling the two together. Because this is so much thicker than the cream cheese, that's why I like to put lots of little dollops like this. Makes it easier to swirl the two batters together. Okay, so now you can use, we want to swirl them together. You could use like a knife or a spatula. You could use, I'm using a wooden skewer. You could use a chopstick. The important thing is we want to marbleize it, but we don't want to mix it thoroughly. So everybody has their way of doing it. What I do is just run it. You have to work this a little, because as you can see, the brownie batter is a lot thicker than the cream cheese. And then what I do is just run it. Because you don't want big globs of that brownie batter, so you want to kind of, but we don't want to overdo it. That's the trick. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so now into the oven, 25-30 minutes. So what you want is the cream cheese, it will be set. The cream cheese filling will start to brown. And if you put a toothpick into the brownie part, you'll still get a few moist crumbs. And although it's hard to tell sometimes, the brownies will start to pull away from the sides. So somewhere around 25, maybe 30 minutes, depending on your oven. Okay, our cream cheese brownies are now done. If you shake the pan, it will be set. And you can start to see the cream cheese filling just beginning to brown, starting to pull away from the sides. And if you put a toothpick into the brownie part, it will come out with a few moist crumbs. Now, what we need to do now is let this cool completely and then cover and put in the refrigerator. You will need at least 2 hours. 2 to 4 hours. Sometimes what I do is I just make them and put them in the fridge overnight before you cut them, because just like a cheesecake needs to firm up, so do these cream cheese brownies. So now we'll take the cream cheese brownies out of the pan. Just lift them up by the sides of the foil and put it on a cutting board. Now I let these chill for about 3 hours so that they're nice and firm, and then peel back the foil. Sometimes what I do is actually just peel it right away from the brownie, like so, just to make sure it's not sticking. And then I usually have a glass of hot water and then a sharp knife, and I dip the knife in the water. It just makes a nice clean cut through your brownie. Now some people like to cut away the edges. Some people really like the edges, so you decide. And then just cut right down. And then I just put my knife into my water and just cut like so. And lift it up, and there you can see you got a nice brownie on the bottom, cream cheese, and then the swirl of brownie on the top. So there you go, and then just again dip and cut. I do find if you kind of lift, like I said, and peel that back, that's what the foil back, that's why you want your brownies to chill for several hours. Now you can store these in the refrigerator for probably up to about 5 days, or you can freeze them if you want. But I would store them in the refrigerator, and then you can eat them cold or bring them